Permanent death in video games, or permadeath, is a rather simple concept. The player only has one life, and when they lose it, they have to restart the game from the beginning. There are no checkpoints and no saves. Permadeath used to be the norm in the video game industry's infancy, but fell out of favor as games increasingly became more user-friendly. However, by the 2010s, hard games were back in fashion, and permadeath made its grand comeback. How can we explain its resurgence, especially now that games are significantly longer than they used to be? Isn't risking losing dozens, if not hundreds of hours of gameplay a bit, well, risky? Furthermore, modern games are typically played on a platform, such as Valve's Steam or Microsoft's Xbox. These platforms have particular business models leading players to act as prosumers. This, as seen in the included quote, could lead platform holders to act out in such a way as to influence their users to be a certain kind of gamer, one that would benefit the platform's financial interests. Thus, how can we understand this form of risky gaming in the modern gaming platform economy? I wish to theorize this type of extreme gaming through the lens of Edgework, a socio-psychological framework elaborated by Stephen Ling in the 1980s. Edgework was originally meant to contextualize why certain social groups voluntarily engage in high-risk activities such as skydiving, mountain climbing, or engaging in risky business endeavors. Edgework relies on the synthesis of the theories of George Herbert Mead and Karl Marx to make an account of how the creative impulse of the self struggles to assert itself in a normative manner due to the constraints imposed on it from the overarching social structure. Both theorists argue in ways that are surprisingly compatible that the self can only fully express its creative powers when its impulsive and creative aspect and its socially mediated self are in synergy. Creativity and constraint find themselves in a dialectical relationship as the social dictates, or rather guides, how a person can express their creative urges in meaningful ways. But when those constraints are too strong, the self is over-socialized. The I is crushed by the me. Stripped of their potential for healthy self-expression, members of capitalist societies are in a constant search for the self and are steered towards what Ling calls a consumer-oriented narcissism that rules the lives of many who have the material means to purchase identity-relevant goods. Edgeworkers are thus, in a way, escaping their own powerlessness in the face of increasingly prevalent systemic issues. They thus find escape in high-risk activities that they can control, situations that seemingly straddle the line between life and death, but in which the individual always prevails through preparation, skill, and talent. In doing so, edgeworkers often express a sense of self-actualization and agency. For Ling, edgework is done in situations in which one is physically or mentally in danger, and thus would likely not be applicable to a video game such as XCOM 2, as no real danger is present. But Heather Shea, in her 2017 paper Virtual Edgework, proposes a version of edgework in which players could engage in safe edgework. Shea says that role-playing gamers, in the vein of Dungeons & Dragons, can thus experience the thrills of edgework but without the actual danger. What matters is that there be high stakes on the line, but what will be construed to be high stakes will depend on the meaning given to the activity by the participant. Shea claims that this form of edgework can be applied to virtual worlds such as games, and she claims that gamers participate in the creation of the game worlds that they inhabit. Thus, a big part of the virtual edgeworker's creative expression is an act of shared creation of a form of virtual reality, whether it be a tabletop role-playing game or a video game. But are video gamers truly creative actors? Looking at forms of extreme gaming through the lens of edgework pushes me to ask whether gamers engaging in this form of risk-taking are doing so as a reaction to alienation. And while Heather Shea argues that video games allow for some amount of creative self-expression through the act of creating characters, game worlds, and shared stories, the increasing intermeshing of games and platforms makes me wonder to what degree gamers are able to truly express their eyes through gaming, and inversely, to what degree are games, which are themselves created by teams of developers and researchers to be as meaningful as possible for players, dictating the ways in which players act out their creative selves. Shea argues that our framework can be applied to games in general, but the construction of the modern video game is quite different than how players act out to create the game state during a game of Dungeons and Dragons. Finally, Edgework could be made stronger by incorporating ideology within its framework. Link barely mentions it. This could shed light on how the interest of the platform, or even of a game developer, could influence the ways in which individuals choose to engage in certain risky gaming behaviors. There is certainly more research to be done on how, or if, subjects find themselves molded by the games they so enjoy. Thank you for listening.